So I would like to introduce Patrick McGrath, our education technology specialist from TextHelp. Thank you, Patrick. Please.
I'm not 100% sure how to follow the last speaker, so I'm just glad I got a good introduction there. I am not going to talk technical. I am not going to talk about digital transformation in any shape, manner, or form, because the important thing to me in the job that I do is to walk around a lot on stage with a microphone is the thing that I love to do. But for me, it's about ensuring that everything I say to you today is as practical as we can possibly make it. What I was asked to talk about today was about innovation and about how we can use innovation to encourage students to participate in using technology to help them within their learning. So that's what I was asked to talk about. And what happens is when you think about something like innovation, you tend to think about technology. What is the whiz-bang tool? What is the exciting tool? What is the tool that can help me most and is of most interest? And the challenge with that is that we get to talk about technology for the sake of technology and not teaching and learning. And my role in TextHelp as a company is to talk about the education part of technology. That's all it's about. It's about talking about the impact of the technology within education. And you'll see there on the left-hand side, there's a fairly clear representation of me. Is it good? Is it good? It's my 15-year-old daughter had to create that for me, and I think she exaggerated places that maybe shouldn't be exaggerated, I'm hoping. But the reason I asked her to create that is that that's the world that a lot of our pupils are living in, the digital world. The thought of placing a standard photograph on a slide is quite alien because we want to have our Bitmojis that we use on Snapchat. We want to have our avatars that we use. So that's where we're going. So my job is to ensure that any technology we talk about is talked about from the point of view that it has some impact. The company that I work for, and I promise this is not a sales pitch, we do support tools that help students with both literacy and maths worldwide. We have about 20 million users worldwide with two products called Read and Write and Equatio. We're not even going to look at those, but I am going to ask you to come to one of our sessions tomorrow with my colleague Jamie up the back at I think about 10:30, and you can actually look at the products then. But we're not going to talk about the products as we go through. We're concerned with impact. And so I want to pare it back a little bit as we go through. I think I'm having the clicker problems. Here we go. Let me go here. So when we think about engaging technology, we tend to think about these types of things here. We tend to think about virtual reality. We tend to think about AI. You'll hear people talk about big data. You'll hear people talk about lots of things. There are some wonderful pieces of innovative technology on that screen. Eye tracking software and gazing software that can really, really help people with individual and specific needs. There is augmented reality that can help us be in other places, can help something as simple as confidence or many, many more complex needs. So there are truly innovative softwares that we can start to use and we're all using. But let's think about the technology that we all use on a daily basis. Let's think more importantly about the technology that our students use on a daily basis. Their handheld devices, their tablets, their iPads, their Android devices. Now let's think about the technology that they've started to embed within those solutions for many, many years. And Miles covered it really well in his presentation earlier. We have a vast range of assistive technology in these mobile devices. We have our text-to-speech, our speech-to-text. We have tools that help us interact and interface with the screen easier and better and more manageable than we've ever had before. So what we're seeing is this sort of assistive technology concept that's been around for many, many years starting to morph directly into our handheld devices, starting to be made available. And that 15-year-old that I talked about earlier on that made that lovely sort of super heavy Bitmoji of me, that 15-year-old in my house, she has no individual particular needs. But she uses assistive technology on her iPhone because apparently it's easier to navigate the Snapchat menu on her iPhone. She uses text-to-speech for her oral practice for both her Arabic and her Spanish language learning. She also uses other technology there in text-to-speech for revision and review to check and proof check her notes. So there's a pupil with no particular identifiable need, but is using assistive technology on a day-to-day basis to start to learn. So we can see that this sort of technology has started to morph and it started to gather together in all the devices that we've been using. So assistive technology for me, the word assistive starts to need to go away because we should start to level the playing field with just good use of practical technology to help all students. And that was a theme that we heard very clearly spelled out at the start of the conference here today, that irrespective of your needs, identified or not, the technology is there and should be there to help you. And what we're seeing with technology and assistive technology and all of these devices that our students have is a certain sense of expectation. They have an expectation when they come to the classroom or the lecture hall that they can use this technology in whatever way helps them out. They may not consciously think about it, but they're all doing it on a daily basis. So how do we start to level the playing field? Well, here's one thing we can do. Now, given that we are at an assistive technology conference, I thought I would talk about something that was not technology, but was slightly assistive, and it's this. It's a potato peeler. It's for peeling potatoes. Now, why, oh why, would I talk about this as an assistive tech conference? Well, here's the thing. This particular potato peeler was actually developed to help those with arthritis. So an individual specified challenge that they had on daily life, a company went away and developed the big grips potato peeler. Why? So they made the grip bigger. They put fins on it so we could feel exactly where we are. They also did things like they made the blade sharper. So they just made a better product. They put it on sale. You know what happened? Everybody bought it and they made millions overnight. They did incredibly, incredibly well with this potato peeler. They designed it for those with arthritis, but everybody bought it. Why? Because it was comfortable. It was easier to use. It helped them peel potatoes easier and better. But therein lies the problem. So the Arthritis Association of America came along and it said, that is absolutely fabulous. Do you know what you're doing, OXO people, the people that created this? You are revolutionizing people with arthritis and their ability to peel potatoes. Sounds very mundane, but it's a thing of everyday life. So what they did was they gave them a badge and they said, you can now put on your packaging that this is fully endorsed by the Arthritic Association of America. So it was placed on the packaging. Do you know what happened to sales of that product overnight? It completely dived. People stopped buying this wonderful potato peeler. Sales dived. Why did it? Because those people who did not have arthritis that would have bought it anyway because it was more comfortable, it was easier to use, it was better, it was handier to have that piece, stopped buying it because they assumed that it was only for those with arthritis. And I think we've got a big lesson to learn from this, because when we start to badge technology as assistive technology always, then we automatically switch off a huge section of our student population that want or need to use it. Let's not underestimate the stigma that can go along with identifying particular sets of pupils and handing them assistive technology. We're doing it with the best will in the world, but sometimes the stigma that exists between them and the rest of the student body prevents them from using it to the best of their ability. So another example of this is this step design. This is Robson Square in Canada. Robson Square in Canada, beautifully designed set of steps. You'll notice there that at first glance it has standard steps, but it also has accessibility ramps. So we can think, well, that was actually designed from a very practical standpoint. Beautiful set of steps. It has accessibility ramps built in. We're now a wheelchair-friendly set of steps. But if you think about it in a wider sense, it's just good design. Because yes, we have a beautiful set of steps. Yes, we have them wheelchair ready. But what about me? The person who flew yesterday from Belfast to Beirut. What about me with my super duper luggage trolley? That's very useful to me. I wouldn't have thought about it at first glance. What about the FedEx delivery driver who needs to get the packaging up? What about somebody who just prefers to walk up a ramp? By designing our learning environment and our hard environment like this smartly and carefully, we can actually start to reach a much wider body of users. And so the phrase we use in TextHelp is that technology, when it's integrated, your assistive technology strategy should be designed from a point of view of necessary for some, but useful for all. And let's not forget that as we start to plan through our vision and our mission as we go forward. Technology should be necessary for some and useful for all. And remember this, that every student deserves the opportunity that AT affords. Now, I want to redefine a little bit before we start to talk about where this innovation might come in terms of students. So let's redefine it. So exclusion from the typical sense is this. And it's if we visualize standardized students in very much inverted commas, in yellow dots on the screen, exclusion by definition is all of those students with individual needs that we've placed outside of that periphery. And that's what all of us are working against and working away from as fast as we possibly can. But then perhaps we're starting to move to a segregation point. So we're starting to say, right, well, now what we're doing is we're taking those pupils with students with individual needs, we're now putting them way far outside the circle. We're giving them assistive technology, we're giving them tools, we're giving them things that can help them and strategy to put in place. But they're now segregated, they're in a separate group. That used to be simple things like withdrawal groups or individual special measures. We want to move towards a point of integration. And integration step 1 starts to look like this. It starts to look like this. So now we've taken those special tools and assistive technologies, we've moved them into the mainstream classroom or student population. They now have the tools we feel they need to succeed. And I stress we feel because we haven't taken account of student voice at this point in time and what they need to actually succeed. But integration starts to look exactly like this. So we've taken them, we've moved them inside. What is inclusion and what does it start to look like and where should we be going? Well, inclusion, there should be no definition, there should be no line between those with individual identified needs and those with what we used to class the general population. Because there's a reality in our classrooms and in our universities, and it's this, that the reality is that every single student in the classroom is different. They all have needs. Somebody talked earlier about those unidentified needs that we never talk about. Simple things like confidence and shyness, really, really important things, never mind identifiable disabilities. Those are individual needs, and technology can be used by all pupils to help them learn differently. So we've got to work towards this, and this should be the reality that we aim for. But then there's another 2 things we've got to think about. And one is this. You might have heard of the phrase. It's often talked about, particularly in corporate circles, this phrase of neurodiversity. But what's the reality of that phrase? The reality is this, that if we have identified special needs, in this case, let's talk about something like dyslexia that we've heard talked about a lot today. There are huge upsides in terms of dyslexia, and we never take a grasp of those huge pluses that a dyslexic people can bring intellectually and at many, many, many different levels. And so we've got to start to not use these as debilitating factors when we plan for inclusion. We've got to start to realize how if we supply these pupils with the tools to succeed, we can really, really start to propel and build on that concept of neurodiversity. And then there's the other side, and we kind of touched upon this. Things like dyscalculia. Now, I'm going to oversimplify it, and I'll excuse myself in case there's any experts in the room, but if you haven't come across it before, the simplest way for me to think about this is that it's the dyslexia of maths. That's the simplest way to think about it. Oversimplification, I apologize for that. But the difficulty of grasping mathematical concepts, notations, and writings. And so back home in Belfast, Queen's University recently did a study. And they did a study over about 2,500 pupils. And in those body of 2,500 pupils, there was only actually 1 pupil who had been identified by all of the education services back home in Ireland that had that individual need and had steps in place to help them through that individual need. Only 1. And when it was drilled down into the reality of the potential presence within a multiple number of kids, we actually found that 1 in 20 of the entire student population had symptoms that added into dyscalculia. So none of those pupils were being helped with anything specific. But think about the fact that if we think about technology carefully and we put it in place for everybody, every one of those 1 in 20 pupils, those 112 pupils out of that population of 2,500, could have been helped because they could have had the technology to draw upon as and when they needed it. So for me, when we think about individual needs, it's like this. It's like the magic iceberg. We look at only that top section, that top part that's identified, that's clear, and we don't see all that's lying underneath the water below. That is a particular challenge. So when we plan for learning, which is the innovation that we'll get to, we've got to take into account every single student in our student body. Because design and learning is kind of, for me, like a game of 10-pin bowling. We want to make sure that our learning and the teaching that we're applying is actually taking down as many pins as humanly possible. And it's the very best that we can hope for, that when we throw that bowling ball, that we take down as many as we can. But the reality is this, that if we only plan for the middle set of the pins, we're probably going to get to this point, which is a 7-10 split. We're going to take most of the pupils with us in the learning experience, but we're always going to leave pupils behind. What if we design our learning differently and we supply them with the tools and the technology and the learning approaches that can help every one of those pupils? So that's the true innovation. The true innovation is not about the whiz-bang technology. It's not about those fancy things. It's not about digital transformation. It's not about coding and programming. It is about designing our learning scenarios better and smarter to reach every learner. Now, the reality, of course, is that assistive technology can impact everybody, but it can only do that if we supply the tools and if we design the learning. So what do we need to get from our learners? We need to get 3 things, and then we'll see how we get 3 things. We need to get students that are purposeful and motivated, students that are resourceful and knowledgeable, students that are strategic and goal-directed. Now, why do I mention these things? Because what we want from our learners are the same whether they have an expressed and identifiable individual need or whether they're the stereotypical mainstream pupils that haven't an individual need specified. This is really important that we apply the same rules to absolutely everybody. And I'm going to talk about this, and don't panic when we see the brain symbols on screen, but I'm going to talk about this universal design for learning. What is it and why is it useful? Well, it's simply this. It's a framework. And it's a framework of suggestions that we don't have to stick to, but it's a framework of suggestions about how we might approach learning. And from my perspective, we use technology, and we look at technology through the lens of universal design for learning. Sounds like a lot of work, sounds like a lot of brain power. It's not. The brain symbols on there are just to identify there's 3 key areas that we know motivates and encourages our students to learn. They want to know about the why of learning, the what of learning, and the how of learning. And that's how we start to apply these principles, which I'm going to show you very quickly. And the principles are this. When we're thinking about learning, and bear in mind we want to be thinking today about how technology might help us in this, we need to think about 3 separate areas. The 3 separate areas of this are this, and this is the overarching theme of universal design for learning. We need to apply multiple means of engagement. Now, engagement does not mean the shiny tools of technology that we've looked at. Engagement means how do we motivate our learners better to want to learn? How do we give them opportunities for self-efficacy, to review what they've done, what they've achieved? How do we help them set goals? How do we do these things within a standard construct of our learning environment that we're in? And how maybe do we use technology to do that? So that's the first thing. So we need to provide multiple ways for them to engage with their learning, to be motivated, to understand it in context. The second thing is we need to provide multiple ways of representation. And in a technology conference, it's a little bit easier to understand. So multiple ways to represent. Moving from our standard written notes, we can make an easy move to digital notes. Once we've moved to digital notes, now we can actually start to move to audio notes because we have tools and technologies and software that can provide what was once just written as an audio file. Pupils and students can start to listen to it. So we can move beyond there and we can provide different methods of input. So we can say, you know what, you don't just have to read the text. You can listen to it. You can speak if you want to write. You can handwrite with a stylus on the screen. There are multiple ways that you can interface with the body of work that I have here. So that's how we start to design multiple ways to represent. And then the last part is expression. We need to provide all pupils with multiple ways to express, articulate, describe their learning. So that could be as simple as I have an assignment. You can turn in that assignment every way you want, any way you want. You can handwrite it. You can type it. You can use speech to text. You can create a book. You can create an ebook. You can give me a visual representation. You can make me a video. We have to provide multiple ways, because if we provide multiple ways, we give everybody fair and equitable access, which obviously is why we're all here today. So those are 3 areas that we've got to focus on, and that's the tenant part of universal design for learning. So we opened up today and we said, or my session earlier on, and we said, it's about innovation. So innovation for me is not about the wonderful technology that's there. I work for a technology company and I love my job, but it's not about the technology. It's about the innovation and how we change the process of learning, and we use technology to implement those. So very quickly, just the last few slides. As an organization, you might go, oh no, there's a lot of work in this. We have to do new CPD. We have to recreate all of our learning resources. We have to redesign our online VLE. We don't have to do that. And going back to one of our earlier presenters, I think he actually stole it from me. Somebody mentioned that +1, that 1% change. Excellent line, and I use it all the time because I'm a great believer in that. Marginal gains add up. Those small changes make a huge difference, and I was really glad to see it today. We only need to do small things to change our approach to design for learning. We only need to do one change to a resource to make it available as an audio piece or as a video piece. Technology can take care of that. It's our jobs as educators to think about it a little bit more. So we need to, as an organisation, be in a position where we create flexible study resources. We create flexible ways to learn and flexible ways to show learning. And that comes back to how we engage our pupils, how we let them express, and how we represent content. So technology can support all. So just to start to close down, the most important thing past thinking about technology and thinking about how we approach the design for learning is this. Not many people today have talked about listening to our students, our most important stakeholders. We need to listen to them carefully. We need to take a vested interest in how they wish to learn, how they wish to express themselves, and the tools they need to achieve their potential that we've all heard from. To provide student choice and voice should be and must be at the heart of every accessibility decision that we start to take. We saw lots of good experiences of that earlier, but I think we have to just be very clear that they are the most important stakeholders in this, because what we do when we listen to them is we build partners and learning. So I know I'm no doubt over time, and I just see it's 5 o'clock. I am going to encourage you, just on this last slide, to come visit my colleague Jamie in a session tomorrow, where he'll be taking something simple as text-to-speech, and he'll be showing you how we take a standard piece of content and we can convert it out. So suddenly we start to help pupils revise better, we study better, just by one simple piece of assistive technology tool. But again, I'm not here to take the pitch. I do want to just close up on one last slide, and that is back to this one. My passion is to ensure that we reach every learner with technology, that we design better learning experiences, and we use technology not to prop up learning, but to augment good teaching and learning practice that we have. And that is the underriding most important thing. So I appreciate it's late. I thought I was going to be speaking an hour and 5 minutes ago. And I'm sure you all thought you'd be home an hour and 5 minutes ago. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to hand over to the next speaker. Thank you. And if anybody wants me in the meantime, contact details are on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. TextHelp workshop tomorrow, it's at 10:30 for those who would like to attend it. And now I would like to welcome Dr. Maad from IGROW.
I am Dr. Soha Maad, and I will present a talk about building a framework for building socio-technical infrastructure for massive open online education resources, and I will consider case studies from various European projects. I will start first by introducing myself, then propose a framework for building socio-technical infrastructure for massive open online education resources, consisting of a policy, technology, and accessibility framework. Then I will consider 2 case studies that attempted to establish a technical infrastructure for massive open online education resources, an Erasmus Plus project and a grid project. And I will conclude with a future research agenda. Introducing myself, I got my PhD from Warwick University in United Kingdom. Then I worked at Fraunhofer Institute of Media Communication in Germany, at Laboratoire Lyris in France, and Trinity College, Dublin in Ireland, and I established my own European economic interest grouping in Dublin, Ireland. I published several books in the area of grid computing, virtual and augmented reality, research and development, sustainable growth, e-education and innovation, and my latest book about the 4th Industrial Revolution was translated to Arabic in partnership with the Union of Arab Banks, and we have an e-version of the book. Now I will start my talk by proposing a framework for socio-technical infrastructure for massive open online education resources, which consists of a policy framework, a technology framework, and an accessibility framework. The policy framework is set at 3 levels: the national, the regional, and the international levels. The technology framework has 3 main pillars: maturity, connectivity, and complexity. The accessibility framework involves various stakeholders: the economic, the social, and the various target groups. The accessibility framework attempts to build an ecosystem of institutions, people, and resources, and it provides universal accessibility through devices, anytime, anywhere, and propose a universal accessible infrastructure. And this ability is considered at 2 levels: physical and situated, and I will define this in the next slide. Universal accessibility is rooted in the concept of design for all in human-computer interaction and addresses accessibility problem in human interaction with software applications and telematic services. Various application domains benefited from research and development in the area of universal accessibility, including interactive television and media, children educational games, interfaces for the physically disabled, and interfaces for various devices. This ability is considered at two levels. The actual disability. We have seen this event considering mainly the actual disability, the blind, the visually impaired, the deaf, the hard of hearing, the physical disability, the wheelchair user, and the cognitive disability. However, each one of us can have a situated disability. We all are in a situated disability at one moment in time. For example, when we are driving a car, we have a disability. We cannot move too much. We have to focus. We cannot have too much thinking. We have to focus on driving. When we are using a small display, we have a situated disability. When we are in a silent place, also we are facing a kind of disability. When we are in a noisy place, when we are in a space suit, when we have multiple devices at hand, and the language skill is also considered as a situated disability. As we have seen also, we are translating. So when we have a language barrier, this is a kind of a situated disability. Now I will turn to the two projects that attempted to build a socio-technical infrastructure for massive open online education resources. The first case study is an Erasmus Plus project, which is a big EU funding initiative to support higher education. It is a strategic partnership consisting of 6 European institutions under the EU Erasmus Plus framework, having its main focus on school education. And its funding was the total amount 420,000 euros over 3 years. The objective is accessibility, comprehensibility, and collaborative deployment, monitoring and evaluation of learning activities, and the support for construction of open educational resources and wide applicability of technology across discipline. The intellectual output of the project is an open online course consisting of a curriculum, an environment and online materials, and the evaluation of the open online course. The potential impact was wider adoption of computers. This means to teach from the school level technology, and an alternative approach to software engineering, and to unify theory with practice. The second case study that attempted to build a socio-technical infrastructure for massive open online educational resources is the GRID project, a large EU project. The concept behind the GRID project is e-science or e-research, which encapsulates the idea of providing virtual laboratories and meeting spaces where widely geographically separated researchers can interact closely to pursue collaborative projects. According to Bob Jones at CERN in Switzerland, the real and specific problem that underlies the GRID concept is coordinated resource sharing and problem solving in dynamic, multi-institutional virtual organizations. The GRID project was established in several projects over a various period of time. And it started with the Data Grid project, which was followed by the enabling grid for e-science and the enabling grid infrastructure, which is struggled, the big project, is struggled to develop strong coordination and engage the user. The project has grown to involve more than 20 applications, even more, from various domains like high energy physics, biomedicine, earth sciences, computational chemistry, astronomy, geophysics, financial simulation, and many, many other applications. The GRID project addressed several accessibility challenges. The first one is social interaction at the users, at the device, and at the infrastructure level. And it addressed the challenge of open-ended interactivity, access for the disabled, and generalized universal access, and direct access to remote external devices at the grid boundaries. It has also faced the challenge of serving the distant minority and coping with cultural diversity. Various grid accessibility solutions were proposed. The first one was the development of grid middleware supporting interaction with heterogeneous mobile devices, building a web-based grid application portal. But while each of these efforts, there were several efforts toward universal accessibility to the grid, they addressed the universal accessibility problem to some extent, but none of them enabled a complete solution. Now, my future research agenda is to address situated disability, which is to overcome language barrier. And I would like to invite you, if you are interested, to collaborate in this area, to able connect through our profile so that we can pursue further research on situated disability to overcome language barrier skills. Thank you so much. If you have any question, we can take it or we can discuss it during breaks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Malek Zuaiter, the Business Development Executive from MindRockets.
Thank you, everyone. I just made some last-minute changes in my head for this presentation, so don't focus too much on the slides. Focus on what I'm going to say. I'm going to tell you when to focus on the slides. This was a great talk, by the way, the previous one. Thank you. I never thought of disability being conceived in this way. A room that is silent, a room that is noisy in the car. That's very interesting. I actually just read an article on the BBC. Two couples lost a lawsuit against a farm nearby that has bells on their cows because it was too disturbing to them. They couldn't sleep at night. So they lost that lawsuit, unfortunately. But it's a very interesting perspective. This is the first time I'm asked to talk and comply with guidelines, so please forgive me if I fail to do so. I will try my best. My name is Malek Zuaiter. I am from Jordan, and I work with a startup that develops assistive technologies for deaf people. So I'm going to just first begin by trying to give you an awareness of the challenges that deaf people face on a day-to-day basis, and then I'll move, and how it affects their lives, and then I'll move on to our technology and what we do. Do I point this somewhere? Okay. So first of all, there are statistics say there are around 460 million deaf and hard of hearing people in the world, and by 2050 the number is supposed to rise to 900 million. Deaf people are very highly marginalized, as you can imagine, and this is because in addition to their inability to hear, very few of us are communicating with them in sign language. And by us, I mean individuals, where of course very few of us who are not involved with deaf people know sign language, but also institutions where services are not being provided in sign language and content on the internet, etc. I'm cheating from my notes, by the way. So deaf people have a right of access to sign language, and someone shared with me a quote a couple of months ago, and they said that people need to find their accessibility is something to be found and not asked for. It should be thought of from the first point of development of any institution, any website. We should not wait for people to ask for their right of access to any information. It should just be there from the beginning. Oh, by the way, not many people know this. I didn't know this before I started working with deaf people, but sign language is not universal. Maybe, I'm not sure how many people know this here, but yes. So you're probably wondering why there are two people interpreting. Yes, well, there are, and by the way, American Sign Language is different than British Sign Language. So we often think that they're both English, but actually they have very, very little in common. And same goes with Arabic Sign Language. You have Jordanian Sign Language, Saudi Sign Language, Qatari Sign Language. They have their differences. And even in Jordan, by the way, in the south and in the north, you will have different signs. It's a very interesting culture. And I think people and countries should work on getting representatives of these different deaf communities in one place to sit together and trying to come up with a national dictionary, which many countries now have, but unfortunately our countries lack, I think, in this regard. And these dictionaries need to be constantly reviewed and developed by the different representatives of the deaf community in one place. So another very important piece of information that not many people know is the fact that deaf people have a very high illiteracy rate. When we first started, people were asking, why do you need anything, avatars to translate text to sign language? Deaf people can see the text. Unfortunately, this is a very big problem. There's a very high illiteracy rate. According to the World Federation of the Deaf, the percentage is around 80% of people who are deaf have a very, very low literacy rate. And this, of course, has many reasons. I'm not going to get into the details. I was talking with Mr. Humberto, who's a member of the European Disabilities Forum. And we were talking about many, many factors that go into this. The first, of course, being, and we take this for granted, by we I mean hearing people, how we learn languages. Deaf people cannot hear the sound of a letter. Okay? So when we learn language, we know that this letter corresponds to a certain sound. And then we can form, I'm not a linguist or anything, but there's a fundamental difference in how we acquire language. Deaf people have to memorize perhaps the shape of the letter and the shape of the word. So we have to take this into consideration. Another problem is the fact that, also this is very interesting, I was told that 95% of deaf people are born to hearing parents. And often hearing parents have no or little education about sign language, about deaf culture, about all of that. So that will aggregate this marginalization and this illiteracy. Of course, also the economic situation goes into this. Many, many factors goes into this. And one of the most important things to consider is if anyone, not only deaf people, if anyone is deprived of language education at a very young age, it becomes extremely difficult for them to have language when they grow and to have basic skills. So we have to tackle this at the very early age. So, imagine, I want you to just not take things for granted, because if you're not involved with the deaf in one way or another, or if they're not in your family, you do not know this. Imagine you don't have access to text, okay, and you don't hear. So you don't have, these are stories that have been told to us by deaf people. Emergencies, for example, when they're not coupled with sign language, they have no idea what everyone's freaking out about, let's say in a building or in a subway, okay? Another thing is the internet. The internet, is, I think you just called it the fourth revolution, right? Information. You can imagine Google, Wikipedia, Facebook, social media, none of that is accessible to people who have very high illiteracy rates and are deaf. Another very important problem is the news. We received, some of our deaf friends told us this story in Jordan. There was a national holiday in Jordan on a Monday or something, and deaf people had no idea about this holiday because we only get on national TV at 6 o'clock 1 hour of deaf interpretation, sign language interpretation for the news. So they had no idea. They showed up next day to work, and there was no one at the office. So how is this? You can imagine how this affects them. Lastly, there's also a lack of human interpreters. I don't know about Lebanon, but we've worked in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, in Korea even, which is a very developed country. There's a huge lack of human interpreters. In Saudi Arabia, there are 20 certified interpreters for around, 700,000 deaf people. This is incredible. So now that I've painted a picture for you, and by the way, I should also note that I'm speaking from my experience with the deaf community in the past maybe 3 to 4 years. So if there's any inaccurate information, I do ask your apology, and I'm still being educated about this, and especially the terminology. If I use any terminology that might offend, please educate me afterwards. So what about us? What are these avatars? Where are the avatars? These avatars. Well, let me tell you the story. Mahmoud Darawshe, who's my partner and co-founder, founder of MindRockets, he was in 10th grade when his high school noticed that he has an aptitude for coding. Okay? And this shows you the importance of education for young people who have skills and how they're able to nurture that skill and bring something out of it. So a teacher of his, I believe, was heavily involved with the deaf community and told him, okay, kid, you know how to do your magic on the computer. Why don't you think of a solution for deaf people? Research it. And so he researched what they need, what their problems are, and he came up with avatars. I believe we have an animation here. Let me just get to it. Okay, of course, the avatar was not like this in any way. I'll just give it some time for them to look before we talk. Okay, so when Mahmoud first started this, the avatar was in 2D, it was very choppy. This is a much better developed version, and hopefully we'll develop it more and more. But anyway, Mahmoud developed this when he was in 10th grade. I mean, I don't know, can you believe it, okay? How many 10th graders now that we have that we need to pay attention to and look for what skills they have so that we might nurture these skills, okay? So he won a huge award at the time, 3rd place in the Intel ISEF Award in 2008. And then he went into university, he started working and kept this technology as a side project, to dabble with. But when he put it on the App Store, he started receiving thousands and thousands of downloads from the US. We first developed American Sign Language, by the way. Tens of thousands of downloads, and then comments. I will show you, inshallah, some comments. People telling him, thank you so much for helping me communicate with my granddaughter. Thank you so much. I'm communicating with my landlord for the first time. And this is a kid who was in university. So you can imagine the impact that this was having. And at the time, he quit his full-time job and he decided, okay, I'm going to give this my full-time. And now here we are. We are like 7 people in a startup. We're working in Jordan. We have 2 deaf people on the team, and I'll tell you how we came to include the deaf people in this process. How much time do I have? Can I have any signal? 5 minutes. Oh, okay. Can we leave some time for the questions after the 5 minutes, or this is including? Okay. So when we first started, I personally went and visited all the deaf schools and clubs in Jordan. And Mahmoud, when he was young, he also visited all the deaf and started hearing from them. Okay, guys, what do you need? And I showed them the technology on screens, and I wanted to hear their feedback. And so some of them were very excited. Some of them, I noticed, told us that you need to include deaf people in this project. If you do not include deaf people, it's a waste of time. And we noticed that many high schoolers and university students develop research projects that are very cool for deaf people, but they don't have any deaf people on the team. Same goes with other assistive technologies, like for the blind, autism, arthritis, anything. So we made sure to visit all the deaf clubs and get to meet some deaf people that can be on our team. And now we have 2 people Mahmoud developed a system that is very technically impressive. By the way, his talk is tomorrow. Make sure to attend it because it's much cooler than my talk, okay? He developed a system where now our deaf team can, in real time, make sure of the quality of interpretation. So if I go to this website, as you can see, and translate one sentence, the sentence will go to this system. Our deaf team members will quality assure this interpretation and we'll send it instantly to the animator to be reviewed, etc. This is very new, by the way, and we're very excited about this. And so I think now we have around 200,000 downloads of the mobile apps, but you have to understand something, that we are a business. We needed funds to keep this business breathing, okay? And that was not very easy. And so after having this impact on the personal level, we thought, okay, we need to find a business model that works for us, that will keep this company going and help us develop these avatars, 3D and facial expressions, start doing everything. I'm sorry? Donations. Oh, it's not that easy, believe it or not. We're trying. But actually, we are in a good place compared to startups at our age, I think, yeah. Where was I? Yes, so we developed, of course, deaf people started telling us about the news, about websites, about all of that, so we developed the website interpreter, which is what you can see now. And we started targeting governments, whom we believe have the initial obligation to make their services and information accessible for deaf people. And now we have around 11 ministries, maybe, 11 ministries and private institutions in the Emirates mainly, also in Jordan, in Lebanon. By the way, if you go to the AUB website, I don't know how many people have seen this avatar. Make sure to check it out. And so this is how we're monetizing this service. And we presented this service around the world on the biggest competitions, biggest conferences, and we received lots of support. So that was very good. Let me just skip all of this and get... We also developed the avatars for Facebook and Twitter, social media for the first time. Now we have maybe 60 Facebook pages and Twitter pages with the avatars integrated. And most recently, Mahmoud developed the book interpreter. So we have now a PDF reader, you know, like the ebook reader, with the avatar integrated that can be used for educational purposes. It's not launched yet, so wish us luck with that. This is a concept for pharmacies also. Solution for pharmacies. This is Mahmoud. I'm telling you, it's very cool. He's with Mark, and so hopefully you can hear from him tomorrow. Lastly, this is me getting fancy awards and stuff for this technology. I just want to end by saying how important for me the being made aware of the challenges of people with disabilities from a young age. So when I was in high school, I'm a very tough critic on the schooling system, by the way, but this I have to give credits to my old high school in Jordan, Amman National School. The school was built next to a school for people with Down syndrome, like door to door, okay? And every week we had to go and visit this school and just hang out with the kids during the break time. Every week. This was, for me, the most important experience of my education. Many people are not aware of all the problems that deaf people face, or blind people, or autism, or Down syndrome, because they have not met them, they have not seen them. That's why I urge you, everyone here, in Lebanon, or wherever you're from, to go to clubs, deaf clubs, blind, for the blind, autism down. Just go, take your kids. It's very important that you take your kids and let them interact with them constantly. This will create people who are aware from an early age of the challenges that face our citizens, co-citizens. And when we have policy makers who have this in them from the start, you can imagine that they will build infrastructures that are from point zero is going to be accessible. It's not going to come as a secondary thing. Oh yeah, we want to do this to achieve some what do you call it, quotas and all of that. No, they're going to think of this from the start because they have lived with this. So I always end on this note that this world, believe it or not, is not only for people who can hear or who can see or who can walk. This world is for everyone. And now we can make it so with our technologies, with our governments, with our policymakers, with our donators. Let them hear this message. So help us achieve this together. And thank you for everyone for listening. I'm sorry.
Anybody have
Questions? Yes. Do you want a mic for the interpretation? Can we have a mic? I'm sorry. By the way, thank you so much for interpreting. I know I talk too much.
Yes.
This must be very
Thank
tiring.
you.
Thank you so much.
They've been standing since morning, by the way. Really, thank you. A big thanks to them. Since we're talking about technical and applications, have you thought about like a mobile app where, similar to the translator, where you can talk, it will translate automatically to another language, an application where you can talk to, and then it will translate it into sign language. And
Speech,
then,
you mean? Speech.
well, I can talk to the application, but then I can show it to the person who's deaf in front of me. It will translate to a sign language. And then when he talks or when he makes the sign language, it will translate it back to me. Because
Yes.
I was trying to speak this morning.
Mr. Humbert, yeah.
Exactly, and I felt embarrassed because I didn't know how to talk. I was trying sign language, but in my own sign language, so it didn't really work out much. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, by the way, and we get this a lot. It's very intuitive that, okay, why do you have one direction? Why don't you have the other direction? That's true, but the other direction is a different technology, and we need resources for that. We barely have now...
Have you done the one direction, which is you talk to and it will translate to
Yes,
something?
the speech exists on the app. By the way, I should advertise our app since I'm here. It's called Mimics 3D. Find it, please. It's for free on the App Store, on the Android, okay? Download it. It's for American Sign Language. And for Arabic Sign Language, we have Al-Turjuman, okay? Talk to us, please, at our booth, and we'll tell you more. But we have speech to sign, but we prefer text to sign on a wider scale because it's more accurate.
Yes.
And for now, we want to solve one challenge at a time. So for now, we just want to focus on making the information that exists available for deaf people.
Okay.
Absolutely, we should work on making technology that will also listen to what they have to say, of course. And many people are working on that. But for now, we have to focus. As a startup, by the way, any business majors here, listen to this carefully. You have to focus on your first thing and then, of course, have milestones for the future.
Well,
Yes,
if you're interested in, you said you need resources, we have brilliant students here at AUB, and we're in IT, we're doing some work with students like chatbots and others, and I was thinking maybe we can, if you're interested, we can find some opportunities to work together to build this. So
Of course, we're always...
I'll give you my contact number.
Yes, please, thank you.
She has a question. Are you married, and how old are you?
I'm not married, unfortunately, yet.
No, I'm just wondering how old is you and how Mahmoud, how old is he? You are so young, and I love the work you're doing.
I just shaved today, so I look even younger. I'm 27 years old, sorry.
Okay.
And Mahmoud is 27 years old. We're the same age.
Impressive.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please. Can we take a couple of questions?
Thank you. You mentioned that bringing deaf people on the team provided much more value and acceptability for the community. Can you tell us some concrete examples on how it benefited the
Yes,
project?
of course. Well, when we first started, we we had the avatars with no background in the back, okay? This was intuitive. You know, it would be very cool just to have an avatar and move it anywhere on the page. But one of the first comments that we received is that, no, you have to have a solid background with solid colors for the signs to appear clearly. And maybe Mahmoud can tell you some more in tomorrow's speech about this. But we have many things like facial expressions, the importance of having facial expressions, of having control over speed of the sign. So now if you go to our settings, you can control the speed of the signing. And of course, the sign language itself, because I did not mention this explicitly, but sign language has its own grammar. It's not the same grammatical structure as our spoken languages. And so this tool that Mahmoud created, which he's going to tell you about tomorrow, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not very technical here, but yeah.
Actually, the most and more important of encouraging deaf people with us is that after meeting with them, we discovered that they want to control the language as it's their own language. It should be built the way they want it to be built and to be reviewed and changed and enhanced every day to day. So we are, as hearing people, we only provide tools. They want to control their language, and that's their right. Mm-hmm. So after 2 years from last 2 years until now, they are the people who are really building the language themselves. We are just here to help, not more.
Yeah, so one example, if the sentence that goes into the system has a different grammar than the sign language grammar, they will reorder the words to fit the sign language grammar. Correct, boss? Yes. Any other questions? Perfect. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you everybody for being here. I really want to thank our sign language interpreters for working hard all day. Thank you so much. And I'll see you all tomorrow at 9:20. We have a nice small show in the morning. And then there will be very interesting panel discussions here in Ma'mari all throughout the day. It involves policies and independent living, and there are government officials, employers, so it will be very interesting. And on the other hand, we will have a lot of workshops in the building. Please make sure you check the program and select your workshop. MindRockets, Mahmoud Darawshi will be there at 10:30 in room 230. Okay, so see you all tomorrow. The exhibition. Yes, of course. Don't forget to check our exhibition. MindRockets is there. TextHelp is there. Microsoft is there. You must check out the solutions. Thank you, everybody.